Good morning. After a long time, I'm making another video, and the topic of my video for today is types of property frauds and cheatings. So, I've made a list of almost 10 types of frauds and cheatings, and the property owner, the landlord, becomes the victim. So, if you give me permission, I'll start. Number one is mostly what happens is when an occupier of a building or a property has occupied it illegally without any title, or he is having a defective title. He is not even the owner of the property, and he is retaining that property, he is in possession of that property. So, what does the landlord do in this case? Well, he will file a suit for possession along with the necessary criminal complaint for illegally occupying the premises, and try and win the case on the basis of the evidence and both documentary and oral witnesses, and that's how this case is contested. Now, my second type of fraud or cheating which comes into my mind is when a tenant continues in a rented accommodation without paying the rent. This is again I won't say it a property fraud or cheating, because normally civil suits are filed in these matters, but the real landlord or the tenant becomes a victim. This also has two types. One is when the rent is below 3500, the case goes to Delhi Rent Control Act, and when the rent is beyond 3500 rupees, the case is filed under Transfer of Property Act. So now coming to the third type of fraud is ownership documents, property documents based on the basis of false and fabricated signatures or photographs or any kind of falsity or any kind of fabrication in those documents. So this is a very common fraud amongst land mafia across India, maybe across globe, when you make a false signature or a false document of a property and claim to be the owner of that property. So normally, along with a police complaint or for registration of an FIR, you go for the cancellation of that document along with the necessary stay application. Now, fourthly, the type of fraud or when the landlord becomes a victim is when there is an agreement to sell or a builder-buyer agreement under which there are certain terms with regard to payment of the consideration amount, the payment, the title, the time of payment. Then there are dues on that property, and there are various other things which include the terms and conditions of that agreement to sell or builder buyer agreement. And normally in many cases the seller of that property is does not comply with those terms and conditions, and in fact plays a fraud upon the buyer and projects himself to be the owner. Sometimes he does not take payment of the property on time, he delays the possession, and there are so many other. He does not pay the dues on that property, whether it's related to any house tax, MCD tax, or whether it's related to any electricity tax, water, any kind of misuse charges, or that property is sealed. So all those terms and conditions which have been accepted in that agreement to sell, the seller normally plays fraud upon the buyer, and the buyer again becomes the victim. Now, fifthly, there are frauds with regard to false cases of property and multiple litigation. This is also a very, very serious thing, that when in spite of not being the owner, the person does not have any locus standi to file a case. He is not even the owner, or he does not even have the title. He just goes to the court against the genuine person, against a genuine buyer, or against the genuine owner of the property, and tries to manipulate court processes against him. So that's again one of the frauds which are played upon upon the landlords. Sixthly, there is already a suit decided in favor of a party, the landlord, and again he tries to go to higher courts, or on the same facts he will file a case again. So that's also the sixth fraud which is played upon. Now on the seventh number I have put is I mean, somebody is not even the owner of that property, and the property is being sold with a defective title, or in fact no title. Supposedly I am planning to buy a property, and I go and see that property, and an X or an A projects himself to be the owner of the property. That comes under the legal maxim of caveat emptor, and he says that I am the owner of the property, give me money and I'll sell you the property. So in that case also a lot of frauds happen. Now on eighth number, there is a case there are cases where people rent out properties without having any title. I mean, either it's in co-ownership or some other thing, some other kind of fraud, some other title dispute, but they're not even the owners and they're enjoying rents. So that's again, there also the landlord becomes the victim. Now on ninth number, there are mortgage frauds played upon banks, financial institutions, a lot of business houses, a lot of shrewd businessmen. What they do is they overvalue their properties and they take a bigger loans from the banks or the financial institutions, and then while at the time of not in succession of not paying the bank loan, and then when the property is auctioned, the banks and the financial institutions realize that the value of the property is much lesser than what the sanction loan was. Now in the end, on the 10th number, this is a very very serious emotional and personal thing for people, where joint family property frauds happen. Sometimes the elder brother is in possession of the property and he's not ready to part with the rent on pro rata basis or on profit basis. Sometimes there is a fiduciary relationship between father and son, or elder siblings and younger siblings, and sometimes there are frauds preyed upon by youngsters upon their parents or their elder brothers, and they deceive them and they use undue influence upon them to register the property in their names, and then they kick them out. So this is a very personal issue, but then there are always courts to go, and I hope that I'm quite clear in what I could shed some light over the fact that what type of frauds are happening with regard to property. You should really take care, keep all your documents of property intact, keep the possession intact, and make sure that there is no undue influence on your properties or on your personal front, so that you can enjoy the benefits of your properties. Alright, so this was my brief discussion. I hope you would like this video. Okay, see you. Bye bye.